I was on a live stream today, not a live stream I was a part of, but I was in the chat, and somebody had left a super chat and they left a comment pertaining to what I'm about to talk about right now. It says Australia scraps COVID-19 vaccine that produced HIV false positives. Could you imagine if you went in there for a vaccine and it came back and told you you had HIV and you're sitting there wondering how in the hell did that happen? Like, anybody would be frantic and scared shitless if that actually did happen to them. And this actually did happen. Like, I had to make sure that this was actually legit. But when all I went and did was type Australia HIV vaccine, typical words and everything like that into the search bar, and a boatload of articles popped up within the last day. So this was very recent when this happened. Like, I don't know what they got going on over in Australia, but that is something that will have anybody on edge. Good thing, hopefully, none of those people are suicidal, because anybody gets something like that, they feel like that's a life ender right there. And, who knows what anyone would do in a situation like that. But I'm going to go ahead and get into this article coming from BBC News. It says, Australia had previously agreed to buy 51 million doses of the vaccine being developed by Australian firm CSL and the University of Queensland. The government said orders of other vaccines would now fill the shortfall. CSL and UQ stressed that the positive results were false, meaning that trial participant health was not at risk. The Australian government said it had now entered an agreement for Novavax vaccine, and it upped its existing order of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. The UK was the first to begin rolling out a vaccine from Pfizer this week. The vaccine had been in stage 1 of trials and proven to be effective in making antibodies. But it also generated HIV antibodies in some recipients, which meant it showed false positives for HIV. Further testing proved the HIV was not there. CSL and UQ said fixing the flaw would take about a year. Look at that, a year. They said it's going to take a year to fix this flaw. So that means people who are going in and take this vaccine could possibly get back a false positive HIV result, and they don't even have it. They said a year. It should have never even happened, but it shows you right there, they're not ready. It's not just the US that has an issue. It's other places. This has got to be one of the worst things I could hear about this vaccine right now, because this actually happened. This is not speculation. It's not some conspiracy theory. This actually happened to people in Australia who took the vaccine because they're rushing it. They're not taking their time. Now, somebody had made a good point. They said AIDS and HIV, speaking of it, is a perfect time to bring it up, has been around since the 80s. Well, especially AIDS, for more so than anything. They do not have a vaccine for it. They don't have a cure for it as far as we know, but they do give them medication. Now, you're thinking about a disease or an illness or a virus that has been around since the early 80s. So you're talking about roughly around 40 years or more. You mean to tell me they don't have a vaccine for that, but they can manage to cook up a vaccine for something that exploded this year, within the year that it happened? And mind you, the strain that is going on now is eons beyond the strain that we had back in March. I heavily believe that this thing has mutated a few times over since its inception. And then they're saying that, you might have to take multiple vaccines. Let me also remind you, the vaccine is not a cure. It's not. You got to put that out there. It is not a cure. Let me say it again. The vaccine for COVID-19 is not a cure, because some will go into this blindly thinking that it is, and it is not. But let me continue. It was likely to work, but we knew that we didn't want to have any issues with confidence, and this false positive test may have caused some confusion and lack of confidence, said Brendan Murphy, Secretary of Australia's Department of Health. Now, this is the second video I've done about this vaccine, but in another continent. Now, the first time I talked about it, it was over in the UK, where you had them giving out the vaccine and giving out the wrong dosages. Either people wasn't getting enough or they were getting too much. Now you have Australia giving out vaccines that's giving out HIV false positive tests. Now, I haven't heard anything strange happening over here in the States, but what is going on over in the UK and what's going over in Australia is worrisome. And I didn't think that it could get worse than the UK. The UK actually is not as bad, even though it is bad, but it's nowhere near as bad as this. Vaccine co-lead Paul Young described the decision as devastating after 11 months of living and breathing this project. While this is a tough decision to take, the urgent need for a vaccine has to be everyone's priority, he said. Keywords there, urgent, need. That just spells rushing to me. Other medical experts have also praised the realistic decision to abandon the UQ vaccine, saying it reflects the reality of vaccine development. In general, about 90% of vaccines never make it to market. As a global community, we have been spoiled with the unprecedented swiftness and success with which the development of COVID-19 vaccines have taken place, said infectious diseases expert Sanjaya Senayake, I can't pronounce that name, from the Australian National University. Australia has all but eliminated community transmission of the virus after getting on top of outbreaks in recent months. Now, I did see in a video recently that the people in Australia are just carrying on. Like, looking at that video, you would think that it's pre-COVID-19. Like, they're just moving about. They're not wearing any mask, not doing the social distancing thing. They're just moving about. Like, so they got a grip on, you know, the virus over there, which I can commend them on. But this right here makes all of what I just said look bad. If this was even just one, here's the thing. Even if this was just one person this happened to, that's bad. But the fact that it happened to multiple people is worse. He says, we don't need emergency approval. We're in a good position because we've controlled the virus, he said on Friday. That's the only thing they can really positively say, is that they've controlled the virus, which they have, because I've seen proof that they have. So I'm very confident about the successful vaccination strategy that we'll be facing next year. The government said it prepared for this sort of situation and as such has spread the risk with multiple deals for vaccines. Prime Minister Scott Morrison said focusing Australia's manufacturing efforts on the other vaccines would mean we are more likely to have the entire population vaccinated earlier rather than later. Early 2021 is still listed as when the first vaccines, most likely from Oxford AstraZeneca, are scheduled to be given to Australians. Now, that's the same one that's over in the UK. Australia has a population of 25 million people. It recorded just one case of local transmission in the past week, which is phenomenal, by the way. The nation has reported 908 deaths and 28,000 cases so far during the pandemic, far fewer than many nations. Now, you gotta think, this is a nation that has 25 million people in it. That's relatively small compared to America. But Australia is that shows you that Australia is a fairly small continent. And they have had less cases. They haven't even reached 1,000 deaths since March, since this thing started. Meanwhile, over here, that's all I'm going to say. It has been praised for responding quickly to the pandemic with border shutdowns, lockdown measures, and aggressive contact tracing efforts. Some failures, however, have been blamed for deaths. Victoria crushed the country's worst outbreak after 4 months of a severe lockdown in the state capital. See, so that shows you right of Melbourne. So it shows they said they've been in lockdown for 4 months. So you're talking about I don't know if you really want to include March, because March wasn't a full month with the lockdown. I think the lockdown in March happened like the 3rd week of March. So you gotta think, well, you can say March, April, May, June, maybe part of July. So they stayed in a lockdown way longer than we did. But you know, over here in America, as a collective, we are very arrogant, hard-headed, and egotistical. And I've said that plenty of times. But all that's good and fine that they got their numbers low, and that's very good for them. But at the same time, that to what you see on your screen is horrible. I have a question for the people down who are going to leave a comment on this, because I know y'all going to sound off in the comments about this one. If you took a vaccine and it came back and said that you had HIV, how would you react? Like, I know, like I told you, you will have a ball of emotions going through. You would be scared. You would be panicking. You might cry. Because it's like, you'll actually think like, okay, who's the last person, if I'm not married, that I had sex with? You know, and then you got to go and find, you got to go talk to that person and say, look, we need to go to the clinic and we need to take a test. We need to take a STD test just to be sure. Because something's coming back saying that I'm positive for it. And it's crazy that this is showing up in a COVID-19 vaccine. That's what's showing up in a COVID-19. Something like that should not pop up. So they put something in that vaccine that's supposed to detect I guess an STD. And it got mixed up in there, and that's what it came out with. Like, that's very weird. That is very, very weird. And they better hope that they can get that down some, because I can imagine the amount of people that's probably going to try to sue them. They probably got people beating down their door right now trying to figure out why that is. But yeah, that's scary. That is very scary. But y'all let me know what y'all think about this down in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, and I'll talk to you in the next one.